Welcome to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. I'm Matthew of castingacross.com, where I explore the quarry and culture of fly fishing. This is the 324th episode, and it is being recorded in the middle of an incredibly cold stretch of weather up here in the Northeast. The kind of weather that would make you say, I'm not going fly fishing, I'm sitting at home by the fire. And while that's a perfectly acceptable option, something that, as I've said before, does not revoke your fly fishing credentials, there may be a reason why you do want to get out and, bare minimum, take a walk by that stream that you're used to fishing. So before we talk about fly fishing in and around ice today, I did want to mention that last weekend I had a great time with two presentations at the Fly Fishing Show in Marlborough, Massachusetts. This upcoming weekend, if you are listening to this when it comes out, I have a presentation on Friday, the 24th at 4:45, and it is going to be on translating small stream skills to big water. And so I did that as part of a presentation in Massachusetts, and it's going to be a little bit of a different presentation in New Jersey. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. It was great. Had some very good crowds turn out as part of those presentations. So again, I'm looking forward to this upcoming one. So I will be in New Jersey definitely all of Friday and most of Saturday as well. But back to the main topic that we are looking at today, and that is fly fishing. Not just when it's really cold out, but when there is ice. When there's ice on and around the water, what does that do for fly fishing? Does it change fish behavior? Does it change your approach? Does it change your technique? Does it change your access? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And the first thing I want to mention is that under normal circumstances, ice is not going to impact the fish, what they're doing, and how they're doing it. Under extreme circumstances, when you get what's called anchor ice, and this is when things are so very cold that ice doesn't just form on the banks and across the surface of the water, but actually goes all the way down to the stream bed, that's very problematic, and that is usually under the most extreme cold circumstances and often coupled with very low flows. There are a bunch of other variables that would impact this, but that is essentially the situation that you're going to see when you get this anchor ice that could, worst case scenario, you've probably seen pictures of this, it's kind of tragic when it happens, but that entire stream freezes up and the fish actually get stuck in it. Sometimes you see this when the water levels fluctuate and you have ice and then the water raises if it's like a tailwater or if it is some sort of impoundment, and then you'll actually get water coming up through holes and then it freezes again. You've probably seen pictures of critters that get frozen out in lakes like this. That's what happens in that situation. This is a little bit different, but all of that to say, usually most situations and scenarios you encounter where there is some ice on the water, it is not going to affect fish behavior at all. They're still going to be pursuing the same things that they are normally pursuing, which is food, which is shelter, and at this time of year, they're probably not pursuing love, or that is to say, a spawning ground. So it's usually just food and shelter. So if anything, that ice does provide them some semblance of more shelter, and it does inhibit a little bit of the opportunities for chasing insects on the surface. So all that to say, it really doesn't change things too much. So the fish are really not what we're thinking about so much while we are fishing when there is ice on and around the water. But there are some real benefits to fly fishing when there is ice. And one of the main ones is that when there's temperature, speed, and depth, and a bunch of other things that go into the rate at which water freezes, when there is established ice on the banks of a stream, you will see that main flow and that main current. So if you're fishing somewhere that you're not super familiar with, you've just moved to an area, you're walking to a new part of a stream, and there's some ice coming off the bank of a stream, then you can be assured that that's not where the main flow is. Conversely, if a stream is mostly frozen over, but for some reason, one bank does not have ice on it. Now, it could be that it receives more sunlight or something like that, but there's also a good chance that if there's only a little bit of ice, a little bit of a crust on the other parts of the stream. This part of the stream is where the main flow of the main current is. Now that reveals a number of other things. That there's a good chance that this is going to be a deeper part of the river. This is going to be a part of the river where there may be an undercut bank, but bare minimum, this is going to be the spot that most fish gravitate towards when they want to be in the main line of seeing foodstuffs come in front of them. So as this is one of those things where the river may look relatively uniform. If it's looks kind of like a channel, for a lack of a better term, if you're looking at it in the warmer months, when that first freeze comes in and that ice starts to form in different places on the creek, generally speaking, radiating out from any sort of midstream structure or from the banks. The places that are clearer are going to, more often than not, be that main current. So it's just a nice thing to be able to see and identify. And really, if things start to freeze up, now your options are limited, and you can focus on a stream kind of getting smaller. If there is an ice shelf, then you fish where that ice is not. And so whether that be that reduces the width of that little stream by 25% or by 75%, now you have less stream to work with, and you can focus on that main part of the stream. Now, of course, that's not to say that there's not fish in other places. Just keep that in mind. But this is helpful in really diagnosing the flow of the stream and the kind of the hydrological aspects of a river, which is something that so many of us do just kind of in the back of our heads already. It's kind of the information that we process when we are kind of prospecting for trout. But it's nice to kind of have that confirmation because of what is happening with the dynamics of that water getting colder and that ecosystem getting colder. Another thing that will happen as a river begins to freeze is that you will see temperature differences. There could be warmer water that is flowing into a water body, and that causes that spot and a spot immediately downstream to not freeze. So there's a couple of things that will cause that. As I mentioned already, it could be that particular place gets a little bit more sun exposure. So although you may have a river that is relatively consistent from tree cover and from the riparian areas on the places immediately adjacent to the water on the stream banks, places where you have, due to the orientation of the creek and the cover above it, you have warm spots in that river that get more sunshine. This is going to be a place where you do have more biological things happening, and from a quantitative standpoint. And so this might be a spot where fish seek a little bit of thermal refuge. We're not talking, tens of degrees, but a little bit more warmth means a little bit more insect activity, which means a little bit more of a alluring location for a trout to orient itself into. But you also might see that there is an iceless stretch just that pops up randomly. What's causing it? What might be the issue? In a lot of places where we have springs that influence creeks, not necessarily spring creeks, which are going to be ice-free year-round, but places where there are spring seeps and spring influences, then you can identify these spots because there's enough warmer water, which, again, warmer here, we're talking even the low 50s is warmer, and it's keeping that spot from freezing. I was fishing a creek in Virginia a few years ago and just walking the bank, and all of a sudden it looked like just somebody had taken a pot of boiling water and poured it in one spot, and it kind of created a teardrop shape heading downstream that lasted for maybe about 10 or 15 yards. And I dropped a fly into it. I didn't catch anything. But coming back later in the summertime, that water was significantly colder in that spot. It was just this nice, smooth, round teardrop shape that then pointed downstream, and that was there, and I discovered that because, not discovered like I was the first person, but you know what I mean, personally I found it, because that was a spring seep that was in that area. It wasn't a spring creek, it was just a little spring that gave an influence of colder water during the warmer months, but warmer water during the colder months. And so that's something else that can be beneficial. And again, this isn't just with sunshine. It's not just with spring seeps. There could be some sort of other point where warmer water is being influenced in influencing the flow. It could be some sort of drain. It could be some sort of man-made thing that is allowing warmer water to enter into the system. I've surely talked about it before about how there was a power plant that when this large, slow river would freeze up, the power plant would have a discharge and all of the fish would just be stacked up in there. And it became a popular spot in Maryland and Virginia for folks to go and fish for. I mean, everything from trout that found their way out of some of the smaller feeder creeks to carp and walleye, everything was in this spot because of this warm water influence. And it was easy to see because it was the only place in the river where there was no ice. So that's something else that you might see, as small as a little bit of a warmer spot because of sun exposure, as big a deal as a warm water discharge. When there is no ice, you're going to be identifying those things. But there's some other things that are worth paying attention to when there's ice on the water. And one of them has to do with gear, and another one has to do with safety, but they both have a gear component. So let me talk about those relatively quickly. First of all, ice is abrasive. You might say, no, that nice little ice cube in my drink. It's nice and smooth. Okay. Ice is abrasive at a very, even just at the level of your eyeball, it's abrasive. Certainly you look under a microscope and it's abrasive. And your fly line, although it is made of a dense plastic, it's also made of a plastic that is intended to be flexible, which means that it is not so hard that it will not be abraded by something like ice. And especially ice that is in the process of forming. It's getting water splashed on it. It's going to have crystals that are in the process of getting harder. It is a very abrasive surface. So do not cast your line over ice if you can avoid it. So don't cast over that ice shelf, and as you're stripping your streamer in, have that line taut because it goes from rod tip down towards the water against ice shelf and then into the water pulling on that weighted streamer. That is a terrible idea. I think I'd rather you cast on pavement than on ice because that ice has a greater tension to it, especially if it's wet, and it's actually going to pull your line onto it and lead to greater abrasion. So don't drag your fly line on ice. The same thing is true when it comes to your guides. I've heard and seen everything out there. I think the best thing that you can use is a spray-on silicone lubricant. That's not going to damage your rod. It's not going to damage your rod wraps nor your guides, and it's also not going to have any sort of significant impact on your fly line. If anything, it's almost the same stuff that you use on a fly line cleaner / lubricant. So if you get a silicone-based spray from one of the big companies, I like Loon stuff personally, and you use that on your guides, especially your tip top, then it will slow down, but not eliminate that ice building up on your guides. But once that happens, you want to address that also because what happens more frequently than dragging fly line across ice on the river, you're dragging fly line through ice, usually in a constricted space on your guides, and that can lead to problems. Now, if this sounds like way too much of a hassle, then, just like people have rock skis for skiing in the early and late season where they know they're going to be hitting some debris as they're skiing, maybe have an old fly line that you use when you're stripping streamers through icy weather or through, over rocks, I guess, because it is going to tear it up. So just be aware of that and take your time. If it happens once or twice, don't worry about it, but try to avoid it if at all possible. The next thing is ice impacts your weighting. Ice impacts your weighting. And so ice over moving water is very, very sketchy. I am not a fan of traversing ice over a creek. One of the biggest wipeouts I've ever seen in my entire life is my buddy going completely horizontal while he hit on an ice shelf out in the middle of a creek. An interesting story here. It was a freestone stream that had a significant Spring Creek influence. And so one side of the stream had like 4 inches of ice, and then you had this tapering, growing wider stretch of the stream coming in from the other side where there was nothing because of the warmer water coming out of these springs. But we were walking, I think we were late teens at this time, walking upstream back to our car on this ice shelf. And I don't know if he turned or he stepped on something wet, but he just went completely horizontal and landed. And it was just like a cartoon where all those cracks started forming underneath him. Thankfully, he didn't fall down and fall in, but I've slipped on ice in wading boots. I've slipped on ice in dress shoes. I've slipped on ice on everything in between. Go slow. And if you have to walk across ice, consider going very slowly, and also try to have the right kind of wading boots. If you are the kind of person that has multiple pairs of wading boots, now's the time to break out those rubber soles with the studs. In my humble opinion, and certainly everyone has an opinion and a preference, a rubber soled wading boot with studs is the best choice for walking on ice. Now, some people may argue with that and say, no, 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 it's felt. Felt is actually grippy. And I would agree that all things being equal, if there's just ice, then felt is great. And I don't know, are we using felt again? I can't remember. I have felt replacement soles for like my corkers that I will use in situations like this. But felt is really tacky on ice. The problem is that if you don't have just ice, but you have ice and snow, and your felt is wet, as soon as you step onto that snow is going to bond and create a very slippery surface. Now, there's different kinds of snow, and there's different temperatures and all that sort of stuff. And if you have studs in your felt, then I guess it can be a little bit better. But I think all things being equal, I like the non-stick benefits of rubber with those studs, and that is going to give you, more options for traction. But there's a couple of things to think about. And it has to do with how you get into the water. If you can avoid those ice shelves, avoid them. Try to find a place where somebody else has gone through, or like I mentioned before, find a place where there may be a little bit more current. You might be stepping right into the best place to fish, but I'd rather do that and fish my way upstream or downstream than to step onto that ice shelf, because you don't know how stable and sturdy it is. There's been plenty of times where I've seen big, thick ice sheets, and the only thing holding them on is a little bit of ice attached to roots going down into an undercut bank. And although those things are strong on their own, I don't know if they can hold 150, 175, 200 pounds of person, and that variable weight, especially when that ice shelf is, although it is very rigid, it is extended over a surface that is only allowing it to have a little bit of buoyancy because it's water, not holding it up as if it was being supported by something from the bottom. So I like to step into water whenever possible. And then when I exit the water, one of the things I like to do is try to find some snow to stand on. I like to step into snow because it's going to give me a little bit more traction than standing on ice. And again, if there's only ice, then just go slow. Don't be afraid to use your hands and knees. Crawling out of the river so you don't end up in the river underwater is a perfectly suitable thing to do. And go slowly. Just when you are traversing the stream bank, period, go slowly. But especially when you get down to the water, there's no sense in hurrying things up. You can get yourself in trouble. So again, I would say rubber soles with studs is my preferred choice. Felt if there's no snow. But again, use what you feel most comfortable with. Last thing I will mention about ice is that ice opens things up. As ice closes that water in, it opens up opportunities. I've had some of my best days fishing on busy, crowded waters. They're usually busy, they're usually crowded when the ice starts to form, because now you have people who, for whatever reason or other, either they can't or they won't, they're not out there. And so if I'm out there, and I know that those fish are still going to be feeding, now it's me and those fish, not me and those crowds. So I use the ice, I guess you could say. When things get iced over, I will go out and I will fish in streams that I usually either don't enjoy fishing because of the crowds or can't fish because I don't want the frustration of the crowds. But going there when things start to close in a little bit can really, really be beneficial. If you're okay, if you have all the cold weather gear, if you know how to fish safely, and if you don't mind working a little bit harder to get to and from the water. So just a quick primer on ice fly fishing, fly ice fishing. Not sure what you call it, but that's effectively what we're talking about today. And so if you have any questions, comments, or even interesting fly fishing around ice things to share, let me know. Matthew at castingacross.com. I would absolutely love to hear it. This week on castingacross.com, the first article is called 4 Ways to Avoid Risk While Fly Fishing. And this article actually stemmed from a question that somebody had, or kind of a statement at one of my presentations at the fly fishing show in Marlboro. We're talking about backcountry fly fishing, and I was just rattling off real quickly my preferred gear choices. And someone said, "Oh, and a map." And I said, "Absolutely. It's very, very wise to take a physical map because we can't always rely on our digital maps. And as helpful as digital maps are and how we're going to use them probably 99 out of 100 times, it's important to have a paper map." And so I went through in this article and shared 4 ways to avoid risk while fly fishing, all kind of focused around safety and making good choices. Wednesday's article, this is really exciting. I'm excited to actually kind of introduce this today, and I'll talk more about it in coming weeks. I am a new YouTube video series that focuses on reviewing fly fishing books. And the first book is a fantastic book. It is Healing Waters by Bo Beasley, and it chronicles the stories of a number of servicemen and women who have been positively impacted through Project Healing Waters after some negative situation, either in their military service or even on their journey to the military. And so you can, if you're listening to me, you can see me by going to YouTube or going to Casting Across, and you can check out this book. This week's recommendation on the podcast is an updated version of a product that I have recommended before, and it is the LidRig magnetic nippers. All right, the LidRig magnetic nippers. They have been redesigned. This is like the 3rd version of this product, and they are just great little nippers, super sharp. But my favorite thing, and the thing that sets them apart, is they have super strong magnets in them. So 1, you're not going to lose them. 2, they're not going to jangle around as you are fishing and walking to the stream. They are a premium nipper at a price that falls square between premium and just kind of your cheapos. It is $59.95 and comes in 4 different colors. Great little nipper. And like I said, if you don't want to use it as magnetic aspect, you can always attach to a lanyard, but the magnets are so strong, this has now become my nipper of choice when I'm going deep into the woods. So I will put a link to the LidRig 3.0 in this podcast's show notes over at castingacross.com. Thanks for listening to the Casting Across Fly Fishing Podcast. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast app and rate the podcast on iTunes and Spotify. Then head over to castingacross.com for 3 posts a week on the people, places, and things that go into the pursuit of fish.